Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, the panelists, and the uh, people who are attending this webinar. Welcome to this webinar on the voting facilities for the migrant workers. Today is a special day, 21st day of the 21st year in the 21st century. Uh, let's hope we have a good discussion on this. We have a distinguished set of panelists, and as you are aware, the Constitution guarantees freedom of movement to every citizen and freedom to reside in any part of the country. The nationwide lockdown imposed due to the COVID pandemic placed the plight of the migrant laborers into the forefront of the public discourse for the first time. We estimate that about 60 to 65 million migrants, and most of these are basically interstate migrants who are there in our country. And it is estimated that approximately 60 crores out of the 90 crore eligible citizens voted during the Lok Sabha 2019 elections. Migrant workers, as we are popularly calling them MRIs also, or migrant resident Indians, they constitute a major proportion of more than 30 crore voters who were unable to cast their votes. Quite often, these MRIs are away from the home at the time of the elections. They are working in the informal, unorganized sector and earning meager wages. Internal migrants find it quite difficult to make a trip to their home only to cast their votes. At present, there is no practical arrangement in place by the Election Commission of India for the MRIs to vote in the cities where they are working. There were news reports recently which said that there are about 60 to 70 lakh eligible NRIs, and the Election Commission is embarking upon a venture, and they are launching a pilot project in 2021 in 8 countries, that is US, UAE, Australia, Canada, UK, Malaysia, Kenya, and Singapore, from where they want to enable the NRI Indians to vote. Now, they have laid down a procedure, the Election Commission, where there will be a nodal officer who will be interacting between the voters and the Indian embassies in those countries. But the problem here is that as per the RPA, you are required to have a polling agent representing a polling party. So that will be absent in this particular case. So the recommendations which people are giving is that if at all this NRI voting through the ballot system is to be introduced, then they should follow the system which is followed for the government officers who are posted abroad, that is the Indian government officers. So they are sent the ballot paper directly by the returning officer. The person votes and send the ballot paper sealed back to the RO. There is nobody else involved. There is no nodal officer or any other agency in between. So while political exclusion of the MRIs continues to be a reality, the Election Commission of India has approached the government to allow NRIs to vote through the postal ballots, as I said. And they have said that, it is technically and administratively ready to extend this electronically transmitted postal ballot system, ETPBS, to the NRI voters for the assembly elections which are scheduled in this year. So the question which arises is that while there is a renewed interest in prioritizing voting rights to the NRIs, why do the internal migrants continue to remain disenfranchised for so long, despite having such a huge numerical number? It is important that the ECI finds ways to enable the MRIs to exercise their franchise. Election Commission India's much proclaimed mission to ensure no voters are left behind must result in attempts to secure a system that assures that MRIs also get these long overdue voting facilities. In view of the above, we urge our esteemed panelists to focus on how to enable the MRIs, that is the resident migrants, to cast their vote from anywhere, wherever they are located. Additionally, We would also request that modalities be discussed as to what needs to be done by the ECI, the Election Commission of India, the government, and other relevant agencies, and if the law has to be amended, what is to be amended and how it is to be done, so that we soon have hassle-free voting facilities for the MRIs also. With that as the introduction, I would now request Professor Jagdeep Chhokar, founder trustee of ADR, to introduce the speakers and moderate the proceedings hereon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Verma, for this detailed introduction to the topic. That helps me so that I don't have to do this. The only thing I want to add is that while NRIs are a wealthy, organized, vociferous group, though much smaller in number. Therefore, I think they have, there is a saying that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Whereas our MRI friends, migrant resident Indians, which label the Ajivika Bureau coined for these people, they are, although much larger in number, but they are diffused, they are not organized, they are not a voting bloc, and they are not rich and vociferous as a group. Now, in the lockdown last year, when hundreds of thousands of these migrants walked back, and that became a kind of a major phenomenon in India, including, after some hesitation, the Supreme Court also took it up. One thought that that phenomenon would make everybody who is interested and who cares cognizant of this situation, and that people will think about the internal migrants or MRIs. But the recent developments that have come through, which have been reported in the media, of the Election Commission almost trying to go out of its way to assess or to enable NRIs to cast their votes, has effectively, there is nothing being done for the MRIs. The explanation that, with due apologies to all the three former chief election commissioners that we have, the explanation that I have always heard is that a migrant worker within India can register herself or himself at their place of work. Now that is, I don't have to go into details, that is not a practical option for a variety of reasons, which if need be, I could go. So we need to, I have two suggestions. One, because MRIs are much larger in number, because they are in India, they are actually working hard with their sweat and tears to create infrastructure in this country. They are really making a solid contribution. Should we not think of them before we think of the NRIs who are, living in, I suppose, happier lands and leading a good life, which I don't resent, but I do feel rather strongly as to why should the Election Commission spend so much time, energy and effort to provide these facilities to NRIs without doing even a fraction of that for the MRIs. So this is primarily that I thought I would say, and as I had written to the speaker, that let everybody speak for about 10 minutes and then we shall see how it goes. So may I now request Dr. Quraishi, who doesn't need any introduction, he just saying Dr. Quraishi is enough. So I will request Dr. Quraishi to give his opening remarks. Dr. Quraishi. You
Muted, sir.
you are muted.
Wait,
Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to find out. Wait,
Now we can hear you.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Can, I did nothing. You did something. Whatever you did. Anyway, so thank you very much for picking up a very very important subject and also giving me an opportunity to express my opinion. I have very general views only on this subject. Professor Chhokar has very rightly said that the number of migrant resident Indians, MRI, the new term which you have coined, it sounds interesting, but it will confuse us with NRI, so therefore be careful. Their numbers are large. They, for election commission, they have always been a problem in the sense that our electoral rolls are always in a flux, particularly in metros and bigger cities where there is a constant migration and sometimes there have been demand that the election should be postponed because the electoral rolls are in a mess. Therefore, for us, it is a constant headache, no doubt. Now, what is the legal position? General Verma used the term disenfranchised. Now, these migrants within the country are not disenfranchised. They can register at the place of work. In fact, it is not that they can. The law is, as I understand, that they are supposed to be registered where they are normally resident. Now, if somebody comes to work from Patna to Delhi and he is here for 2, 3, 4 years, so he is normally resident here, therefore can only be registered here. The option to be registered at home instead of here actually does not exist. It's a different matter that election commission has not been very strict about it. If somebody has chosen not to register here, we haven't enforced this act, this clause, that you have to be registered now that you are normally resident here. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages of both options. Basically, vote indicates political power. Now, where do I want political power? In my village or in my workplace? In my workplace, I may have no interest. But at the same time, I think empowerment at workplace also has its importance because if they were not Bihar voters or UP voters were not allowed to be registered in Delhi, no government will ever bother about them. They will not care. No facilities will be given to their colonies. There will be no regularization of unauthorized colonies and all that. So now it is up to the voter then to choose where he or she wants that political power at the permanent home or the workplace. So that has to be decided. But as far as the election commission is concerned, after the voter has made his or her choice, we have to provide voting facility to them. The other issue which Professor Chhokar raised, and very rightly, the double standards for migrants who have gone abroad. Now, if you come within the country, they're treated like dirt, and if you go abroad, suddenly you become, as they say, हमारा दामाद. उनको पूरी care होनी चाहिए. Now, one basic problem which I see here is the principle of discrimination. Now, abroad in Kuwait or Dubai or New York and Paris, we cannot enforce the model code of conduct. Model code, which is so, which we consider so sacrosanct, which election commission, election day is the most talked about thing. Even a cup of tea cannot be given to a voter as bribe. And there, if you have liquor parties and lavish parties abroad, how will we check them? What kind of propaganda is going on? We have no control of the speech. So, and then you are giving them power and even more option than the local migrant. That becomes an issue, and sooner or later, this is bound to land up in the Supreme Court. I don't know whether it already has. So, but in any case, I'll end on that note that the issue is extremely important, and we need to compare it a bit with the armed forces. I think in the context of armed forces, the Supreme Court had once said that it is the soldier's right to be registered wherever he wants. Although we felt that why would he want to be registered at Udi border, where all facilities, whatever they are being looked after by the army. What does he do with his political power on the Pakistan or China border? Nothing. He wants power when he goes home for the admission of his children in school or some petty job. That is where he wants power. The Supreme Court had made it clear that it is entirely his option where the soldier wants. So similarly, the migrants should have the same thing. Now, finally, the four possible options which a committee constituted by Election Commission on the instruction of Supreme Court for in the context of NRI, the four possible wording, like they mentioned about proxy, they mentioned e-postal ballot, which is what being now talked about now, and of course going and voting in the mission. So, or the current legal provision that you can vote at your permanent place of residence. These four options were given to us, but not to our Indian migrants. I'm glad that you started a dialogue on this, and let this discussion continue till it reaches a final conclusion. And we have, and the test of it will be that it will stand the test of discrimination and equality. Whether abroad or in India, you have to be treated with the same respect and equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Quraishi, for fairly insightful comments. I do have some comments to make on 4 points that you made, but I will not make them now so that we don't get into a discussion till the other speakers have had their say. Therefore, I reserve that intervention for later. Can I now request Mr. Rawat to share his views? Mr. Rawat, please.
Yeah, very good morning to you all. I had some trouble in getting to this webinar, but thanks to your team, I am now on. Let me start with our founding fathers adopting universal suffrage. That means every vote counts and everybody is a voter who is 18 years plus, and they are all equal. So we have to facilitate, and Election Commission is bound to facilitate all voters of every category, every group to vote for elections when their turn comes. We should not compare, we should not say this is unfair, that is unfair. All groups deserve to come on board and vote and exercise their franchise. The second thing is about migrant workers. Migrant worker, there is no accepted legal definition anywhere on the statute. Now, who will be taken as migrant worker for enrolling and voting? That's the major issue. And when Dr. Zaidi was Chief Election Commissioner, I was on his team. We discussed this issue threadbare, and we found that Labor Ministry and other concerned stakeholders had no say on this major issue. So we have to formulate a definition of migrant worker, not only for the purpose of voting, but for other purposes like giving certain more benefits which are available in our country for such a class of people. So once that definition is available, we can devise means to facilitate their voting wherever they are, if they choose so. The issue here would be identification, security of their ballot, and as Dr. Quraishi pointed out, that code of conduct means they are not offered allurements which are not sort of under the eyes of the Election Commission. Now, identification. Election Commission started linking Aadhaar with the voter ID in 2015. But somehow it got stayed, and till now the linking process is not complete. This is one of the easiest and safest means of identification of a voter anywhere. And I think if this can be completed by amending the RP Act and making sure to comply with the Honorable Supreme Court's guidelines, this would facilitate on identification issue. Second thing is security of ballot. Migrant workers work in very different circumstances. We may not be able to even imagine. Many places, they may be under the clutches of somebody who is sort of employing them. And they may be forced or compelled by this somebody to vote according to his or her wishes. All these things are very important, and therefore security of ballot is a major issue, and election commission will have to work on this to ensure that when identification takes place, somebody is present to ensure that the same person who is identified as that voter votes, whether it is postal ballot, e-postal ballot, or any other means. But that has to be ensured that that person is exercising his franchise according to his own free will. Then third is code of conduct. Whether this fellow is not unduly pressurized or allured by means of freebies or other things, that will be more difficult, because we have elections in different months, different years, at different places. Now, somebody working in Punjab and election is being held in Jharkhand or Bihar or UP. How the code of conduct will be enforced in Punjab? As Dr. Quraishi pointed out, that there is no means to enforce code of conduct in foreign countries where NRIs live. The same thing applies here. When it is a country-wide election, only then you can think that yes, it will be enforced everywhere. But when it is just 2 or 3 states going to polls, and in other states migrant workers are there who register for voting to their constituencies, how can you enforce? So this will be another major issue, and we will have to work on this. And I think Election Commission has been doing a lot of work on this, and I hope something will come for migrant workers soon. Lastly, I would like to add that Honorable Supreme Court was also seized of this issue, where migrant workers, NRIs, all such classes of voters who were not able to exercise their franchise, the Supreme Court was also considering this issue. I don't know what has happened in that matter. Election Commission may take a cue from there and move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rawat. I think your some of your observations are really very valuable, and we will come to them in detail. I apologize to you that I forgot to introduce you, Mr. Rawat, former Chief Election Commissioner. During his tenure, several significant activities happened, particularly with relating to the finances of political parties and so on. So we are forever grateful to Mr. Rawat for that. The next speaker is Professor Ashwani Kumar. Professor Ashwani Kumar is a professor at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Bombay, or I should say Mumbai. He has done a very significant amount of research on this issue under the ADR in collaboration with the Election Commission, and he has also written a book on this subject. So we now look forward to hearing you, Professor Ashwani Kumar.
Thank you, Professor Co-Chair, for having me here, invited us. And before I, speak about the topic, I would like to thank Dr. Quraishi, Mr. Rawat, and Mr. Rajiv Khandelwal, and General Verma, and also, most importantly, I would like to thank Dr. Zaidi, under whose guidance this was brought on to board. and we collaborated with ACI, and we did two major significant works with ACI, and both have become really very, very relevant to today's discussion. First, we worked with Dr. Zaidi very closely with his team at Election Commission, and we presented our significant report on analysis of the voting rights of domestic migrants in the country. Perhaps that's the most significant report now cited in migration studies in my discipline of political science. And we also, secondly, with his inspiration and support, Dr. Jaideep's support, we also conducted first ever survey of NRI voters, and we presented our detailed analysis, which is also both the reports are available with ACI and also available in networks. What I'm going to do now, within the allotted time of 8 to 10 minutes, I would like to make a very short presentation, PPT. So it's going to be, it's a detailed research-based analysis. So I want to share with everyone, and I will go over it quickly. So may I allow to share my PPT presentation? If there is anybody assisting us from ADR, kindly support me. Dibya or someone? Just a moment, sir.
So you'll have to share your PPT with us. Could you please email the PPT with to us?
Can't you do share screen?
I think I can share here. Let me try. I can't share here. Share the screen. Dibya?
You should be able to.
I think I should be able to. Just a moment. Just a moment. Just a moment, sir. Just a moment. These are the technology challenges, but let's say it's working fine. Dibya is not sharing, it's not allowing me to share. Have you blocked it?
So actually, only
Hello?
the admin has the rights to share the screen. Hence,
Can you tell the admin to allow me to share the PPT?
Actually, sir, there is a limitation. Only admin has the feature to share the screen, and the guest speakers don't have this feature to share the screen. So if you could email.
Anyway, sir, let me come back and let me go over.
Please email or WhatsApp your PPT to any of us. And
I will do that after the presentation, sir. After what I'm going to talk about it without PPT, and then I will send you my PPT, sir.
No, so we will have you next after the next speaker. In the meanwhile, this can be sorted out.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That will be nice, sir.
So we will sort of put Mr. Ashwani Kumar on hold, and I will then request Mr. Rajiv Khandelwal, who is the executive director of an organization called Ajivika Bureau, which has been working on issues related to migrants within India for the last 10 to 15 years or so. The organization has done wonderful work in assisting migrants. Their logic was that everybody tries to prevent migration, but since migration is unavoidable, why don't we make the lives of migrants more comfortable and less painful? That was the fundamental idea with which they started, and now I'll let Mr. Khandelwal take it on from there.
Thank you, Jagdeep, and a pleasure and an honor to be on this platform, especially on an issue that has concerned us for many years without any easy answers. I come to you from Udaipur, where we are headquartered. We are, as Jagdeep sir said, we are a labor support and protection organization working in the Western India labor corridor of Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Maharashtra. Millions of people migrate from the southern parts of Rajasthan to Gujarat and Maharashtra. Not a very long distance, and but as is true for migrants everywhere in the country.
Mr. Khandelwal, you are not audible to us, to me.
Oh,
I'm unmuted. So
no, you are audible. Dr. Quraishi, you might your audio or whatever. Uh, to me, Rajiv is audible. General
okay.
Verma, can you?
Issues at that place, not audible. Otherwise, we can hear him.
Yeah. So maybe I can continue.
You will have to do something about it. Mr. Rawat, can you hear Mr. Khandelwal?
Can am I audible now?
You were audible earlier also.
Yeah. Can I?
Dr. Zaidi, can you hear Rajiv Khandelwal?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
So, Rajiv, please continue. Dr. Quraishi, we will try and see what we can do about that.
Sure. No, I was just only observing that this labor corridor of Western India is actually very typical of how labor corridors everywhere else in the country operate. And that actually has a strong bearing on the infrastructure that might be needed for voting
No audio,
facilities.
please.
Dr. Quraishi, can you hear me?
I think there's a
Quraishi,
problem
can you
in
hear me?
Shall I continue, Jagdeep?
I think you continue. I'm just talking to Dr. Quraishi.
Okay. Sorry, I was losing my thread.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So let's one of the realities of labor migration in our country is that it is not permanent relocation of individuals. It's seasonal, it is circular, and people will come to the cities, come to industries for periods of time, and will go back to their villages. Okay, this will be in the frequency can be as high as a few times every year to once or twice every year. Okay, and so it is difficult. There is no sedentary element to migration. The way it operates in our economy, in our country. The implication is that people will not seek inclusion just in their home states or in their home panchayats or home constituencies, but will also need political inclusion at the point of their employment, and which is where it becomes even more compelling and even more, I think, pressing for them to obtain, and which they are really excluded from. Right now, we did early on in our work, way back in 2012 and 13, we did a study to understand how many migrants had voter IDs and what was the extent of their political participation, and found that many migrants, most migrants, were unable to participate in the Lok Sabha election because they did not see it as they did not see the connection of that political kind of inclusion as having a direct bearing on their reality and their well-being. However, they were coming back, traveling long distances to participate in the panchayat elections. Okay, and we have documented long journeys of people being also brought back to participate in the panchayat and the legislative assembly elections, which also is an indication of their political kind of sense of entitlement that we belong there. In a more recent work which we have conducted in Ahmedabad, Surat, and also a little bit in Mumbai, where we were asking migrant workers who were caught in very hazardous, in very low end kind of employment situations about what will change the situation for them, right? Many of them actually have no sense of entitlement in the city. They do not think about political inclusion here. They do not believe that it will come to them. Also, because these are workers who are not part of a trade union organized kind of movement that will represent their interest to any employer or any industry or a state body. However, when posed with the alternative that whether they would like to participate electorally in their local in the at the point of work, most of them said yes if they do not lose out on the ability to vote back in the villages. So there is, I think, a significant desire to be included politically wherever they are, and I think that is the reality of how migration operates, and we should, also think about that. I do not have a clear answer of how migrants could be included at both points of time at both locations, but I think there is certainly a strong need given that this is how uh, crores of people, 140 crores, 14 crores to at the very least, of people in our country who are leading seasonal circular kind of lives. There is, I have just come back. I've just come back from Gujarat, and we have work in Surat, which just day before yesterday saw one of the most traumatic accidents of 15 migrant workers who were crushed by a truck. Okay, they were sleeping on the pavement just by the roadside, and these are all workers from Banswara in South Rajasthan, where also we have work. Yesterday, most of my team was in that village where these workers come from. Almost the first thing that happened when the accident occurred in Surat is that who do they turn to? Our team was about 70 kilometers away. There was absolutely no local support except the local villagers who were standing by, but no political representation, no bureaucracy, no one to immediately be available at a time like this. It takes, the longest time to even identify the workers who had lost their lives. They are not registered. They have no formal evidence of their presence in the city, which does not only affect their employment relations and their outcomes in the labor market, but also what happens in emergencies like these. If there is political patronage, there's some political kind of support. This is the time when, in these are unusual times, but this is when it becomes most evident why their inclusion is important. It took MLAs and sarpanches from Banswara to show up in Surat to bring the bodies back, right? You know, this is not how this is anyway should not how this is not how workers should meet their sorry end in our economies in our urban areas. But I think the fact that they were so disconnected, especially politically, speaks for why they ought to be present in both source and in their destination land. One of the points that I would strongly argue against is to not link any voting entitlement with Aadhaar. The current difficulty in correlating, we have experience of Aadhaar and PDS, and the two databases are collapsing. They barely speak to each other, and this would be actually further disenfranchise migrant workers if this were to become Aadhaar enabled. It should just be a remote voting infrastructure, nothing more, or nothing, nothing less than that. This is what it should be. It should not have an Aadhaar kind of because it creates problem in even a thing like PDS. Voting is too far and too complex for them for Aadhaar to manage. The two databases will never speak to each other. My is, I don't think this group, this gathering has any contrary view on why migrants should be included. Politically, I don't think anybody will have a contrary view. In fact, if anything, the pandemic and the lockdown has created a certain political identity of migrants. Otherwise, the usual identity is that of occupation or of caste, but this is perhaps the first time there is some consolidation of a migrant identity. And if people were to be given political entitlement, inclusion, it would further strengthen that identity and help them join the labor movement more clearly and more forcefully. And I think that really has to be supported through technologies on our side today to ensure that workers have a fair and dignified way of casting their vote wherever they are. But as I said, in both locations, and we have to find the the solution to this very vexed issue that lives are affected not just in their villages but in the cities that they work, where they are subject to most inhuman and kind of arduous kind of conditions of work and living. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajiv, for bringing in this perspective from the ground. General Verma, is Professor Ashwani Kumar's PPT up for sharing? Divya?
It is in place, sir. It is in place.
I can't see it on my screen.
Sharing the screen, sir.
Sure.
Give us 2 minutes.
And just a moment, sir. Just a moment. We are getting used to what is called Zoom era, sir, and StreamYard era.
2 minutes is too long on internet.
It's true, sir. Just a moment, I guess, and then I can. What I'm going to do, if you can. Uh, this is something that we have done over our research spans almost a decade. Ever since Dr. Zaidi invited us to ECI and Dr. Quraishi and others. We are still engaged with ECI. We are still working with ECI on developing several modalities in terms of facilitating voting rights for the migrant workers. What I'm going to do that first. I'm going to look at the whole debate in terms of the citizenship rights. In fact, our book is titled "Migrants, Mobility, and Citizens," because that's missing here. I mean, like in the debate that we find in migration literature, particularly, and in the discipline of political science and sociology concerning migration, we don't find citizenship. So, what we have done through our research and our project works with ACI, that we have brought this agenda, citizenship agenda, back to the center of our political imagination. So this is the conceptual ground that we are breaking here. So what I'm going to do that very briefly, I will go over and share with you our research that we have done. And the research uh, uh, was sponsored by ECI and also our independent research. If you look at official data on migration, we have used official data on migration, and there are two broad sets of data that inform our understanding of migration, including migrant workers. If you look at migrant workers, it's still obvious to us that there is no systematic national survey done on capturing the reality of the migrant workers as such. The census covers only migration and migrants, what you call MRIs in India and NSOs. So there are gaps between their understanding also that we have done in our large work. In our report also we have highlighted gaps between different sets of data. So that's very important to keep in mind. Although, if you look at the growth of internal migrants, we call it internal migrants, and within internal migrant, we capture the reality of migrant workers, about whom we are talking about voting rights and facility for voting. So if you look at, we are almost getting close to 2021, census. And if you look at 2021 census, from 450 million migrants, we are going to at least, 580 million. So from 55 million interstate migrants, we will be having about 80 million interstate migrants. So this is something that you can see that although there are lots of census series on migrants, and there are various other credible research reports around migrants, but still the problem is about data. The problem is about capturing the realities of migrant workers, particularly, if not migrant as such. Because if you see that it studies so very high rates of migration amongst poorest and socially marginalized groups, and overrepresentation of migrants, including bonded and child labor and Adivasi and Dalits. This is missing in the data. This is missing in the data. And that's a problem for ECI too, to understand why poor within the migrants get, underrepresented. So there are methodological and data challenges, and our big work, shows that. I will share with you at the end of my presentation our big report, ECI, and also the book, that's available, South Asia Edition, shortly by Routledge. We call it in the large, also in my op-ed and other essays, I have been talking about de facto disenfranchisement. It's not de jure. So I agree with former chief election commissioners that there is no de jure disenfranchisement, but certainly de facto is there. That's a reality. Election commissions have done excellent work. In terms of expanding the definition of ordinary resident, and also making provisions for including internal migrants of various kinds for voting. But it continues to be a major challenge. If you look at 900 plus million plus eligible voters, our estimate is millions voters are still missing. They are still not voting. And especially migrant workers are not voting. So if you look at the survey data, which is like if you look at our own work, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and my team did the work, and where we looked at the survey data, and this is very, very significant work that we have done, through regression analysis, very powerful regression analysis. And we found out that 60 and 80% of domestic migrants or internal migrants, including migrant workers, have failed to cast a ballot in at least one national, state, or local elections after moving. So this has a larger impact on what we call invisible citizens. There are two sets of citizens: visible citizens, largely middle class citizens, and with invisible citizens, poor migrant workers. And in fact, we again analyzed in our report and the book also that after representative surveys collected after 2014 national elections, if you look at the turnout rate, I think those who are looking at political right, voting as a political right, rather political imaginary, this is very important to look at turnout data, why people are voting less and less in number in large metropolitan areas. And we concluded with regression analysis, this is because of deficit in improving registration of migrant workers in large cities. And also, if you look at recent work, which is in my discipline, and migration studies also, considered a path-breaking work by Gaikwad and Nellis. Soon it will be out in APSA. And this work does a randomized control trial study. It's not a small micro ethnographic qualitative work, but it's very scientifically done in two places, Lucknow and Delhi. And it concludes that there are bureaucratic obstacles to registering to vote by migrants. I'm sure former chiefs are here, and also people who are listening to us will pay more attention to it. And there are, in this a small presentation, I can't capture everything, but we really, dispel the myth that migrants are not voting voluntarily. That's a myth. In the reality, when we asked them to register locally, 98% of eligible respondents replied yes. Therefore, this idea or theory of voluntary disengagement is rare in our sample research. Also, we found out in 2014, 65% of migrants to Delhi possessed a voter ID card, allowing them to vote in city elections, while the overall average for Delhi residents was 85%. Recently, the young and bright political scientist Tariq Thatcher's pioneering works finds in a sample of Delhi construction workers that only 1 in 5 migrants had ever voted in cities elections. So there is and another thing that we discovered in our analysis and our work over last 10 years, that there are some hot spots where migrants are completely isolated from the political process and social process. For instance, if you look at Dhamtari, rice mills in Dhamtari, there is bonded labor practice. So I think election commission and the officials are paying attention to these new forms of what they call dadan labor and bonded labors in stone quarries, crushers, sandstone, marble and slate mines and plantation, floriculture, sericulture, etc., etc. So these hot spots are very important for us to understanding and also empowering migrant workers. And again, I think we haven't talked about women as migrant workers. And this is something that we have highlighted in our ECI report that look at Palamaru laborers, and especially many women, they have never voted, because most of them are short-term migrants, seasonal migrants, cyclical migrants, and they are not captured in the data, neither NSS nor in census nor by the election commission. So this is something we look at disadvantages of migrants. Since I have very limited time, so I will focus on what our research indicates, bureaucratic hassle cost, and we are also inspired by Latin American research, and research in Africa. So this is what is happening in India is not an isolated case, worldwide, migrants and migrants workers have suffered, this kind of political disenfranchisement, and especially poor migrants, and we have also looked at, through our research and analysis that there is a deep anti-migrant apathy, especially at the lower level of, BLO level. I think we suggested, and when Dr. Quraishi comes on, I'm sure that he will share his own experience about when we told him about BLO level, where there is a deep anti-migrant apathy, and we were talking about Byron Van Wiener's classic work, Sons of the Soil. It is still relevant, political elite and voter exclusion. And there are processes here. I'm sure if you look at my PPT closely, you will find that how these processes, bureaucratic processes, lead to exclusion, and especially in terms of the exclusion of poor migrant workers, migrant workers. So form filling is a headache, documentation is a problem, submission of the documentation is a problem, verification is a problem. Applicants are not informed in cases of rejection. So if you look at, what we suggest about 100 to 120 million short-term migrants, many of them are from poor and disadvantaged, marginalized background. They suffer most from the bureaucratic hassles. There are lots of research available to us to guide how do we, tackle that issue. And there are international practices. So I'm going to close in 2 minutes, sir. So several countries have allowed mechanism like absent voting, early voting, voting by proxy, and I'm not referring to, NRI voting. I'm looking at only migrant workers and migrants voting. So there are many ways of tackling it, and suggested in our report and also in our large analysis in the book that portability of balloting is becoming important. We also need to revisit the definition of ordinary resident in the Section 20 of the Representation of the People Act. And secondly, in the migrant crisis recently in the pandemic, we also closely look at various acts, like contract labor, interested migrant workman, and building and construction worker. There is no provision for enrollment of the migrant workers working in these sites. It's very important for the alignment of these acts with ECI relevant acts. Way forward, citizen action alone is not important. We need to involve political elites and election officials, and registration drives for election officials are very, very important, and civil society groups are effective. And secondly, we also want to dispel the myth that voting back home and the voting in the place where they work. I think times have changed. In fact, Tariq Thatchell very significantly leads us to understand a new generation of migrant entrepreneurs, political entrepreneurs. And that is where we are also looking at, I think for Indian democracy, it's important to look at migrant promoting inter-ethnic tolerance. Finally, Sons of the Soil challenge remain, but they can be altered into less violent forms of nativist reactions. I stop here, and if there is any question and answer session, I will come back and respond to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ashwani Kumar. It is obvious that you have done a very, very exhaustive study, and unfortunately, given the constraints of time, we are not able to take full advantage of your work and your expertise. But still, thank you very much. I am sure some of us will pay attention to what you have done and what you have written and then take it forward. Thank you. We have Dr. Nasim Zaidi. He has also been a former Chief Election Commissioner, and he is a doctor, not necessarily in election commissionership or anything like that. I believe he is a PhD in biotechnology or something like that. So he is a man of a different background, but he spent, of course, all his working life in the administrative service and retired as the Chief Election Commissioner. So I will, and actually it was Dr. Zaidi who prompted me to take the initiative of organizing this webinar. So Dr. Zaidi, thank you very much. And now the floor is yours. I think you are mute. Dr. Zaidi.
Am I audible now?
Yes. Yes.
Am I?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks to you very much, Professor Chhokar. Of course, the idea was developed when we spoke the other day, and I thank you very much for organizing this very nice seminar on very topical subjects. I will make few points in the 12 minutes. All we must understand that the concept of universal adult suffrage has made significant progress. The contribution of all these stakeholders needed. All of us know that there has been increasing participation of voters in the success. We are also as you right ground know 30 crores have not vote or did not in the elections. Who these 30 crores people are? It is that they are youth, they are urban people, they are senior citizens, they are disabled. But one wide belief is that major portion of this this class of 30 crores is constituted by the domestic migrant. Although there are no definitive studies available, Professor Ashwani just mentioned about those. So be that as it may, so let us now, as I mentioned to General Verma also, I think let us include both categories, NRIs as well as MRIs, because for the commission or for any system, all segments of voters are significant. So first of all, I'll make few remarks about the NRI. The audience is aware that the matters were taken up with the Supreme Court. And the Election Commission intervened and formed a committee in 2014. I was part of the commission. The committee consulted all political parties, examined all global international practices, and finally submitted its report to Supreme Court. Finally, it landed in the government through the Election Commission. Now we had to decide on the methods of enabling NRIs. So there were a couple of methods available at that point in time. The first one was personal voting at our embassies. However, this is impractical for a variety of reasons. I'm not getting into details because it will take time. And the Ministry of External Affairs was also not on board, and therefore this idea was not found feasible. The second option available at that time was proxy voting, but again there are issues of secrecy, trust deficiencies, etc., etc., and therefore that was also not found very feasible. Although it was pursued by the government, but the bill formed in this regard was finally has finally lapsed in 2019. But proxy voting is available to service voters, I must mention. The third option was available voting by internet, but again, due to security features, due to technology issues, and lack of faith by political parties in internet voting, this was also not found to be very feasible. Now, the only method that was found feasible for NRIs, I'm talking about NRIs first, was the voting through postal ballot system. And as you would know, there are two ways to enable NRIs to vote. One was physical transmission of postal ballot, but as you would know that sending postal ballot physically is a nightmare and not possible, given the etc. Therefore, the other option and that was found feasible was the electronic of postal ballot system. I will not get into the greater details. Here the transferred electronically to a recent proposal to the embassies will be downloaded to the who will prefer to opt by postal ballot. He reports to the embassy through an identification process, cast his vote, and the marked ballots are returned by mail. So this system was found to be quite feasible in the sense that one, it cut down the time cycle. Secondly, there are no technologies issues, and there are no other issues of secrecy of voting, etc. And I must remind the audience that one-way electronic transmission of postal ballot was started by the commission when Mr. Rawat and I were the part of the commission. We began the experiment in Puducherry for the service voters, and the experiment was hugely successful. I must mention that in past 4 years, 2 million postal ballots have been sent to the service voters by one-way electronic transmission, and I will give the progress subsequently. So this system has been found to be very good. Therefore, with regard to NRI, my suggestion to the commission will be, and of course it is open to discussion, that to begin with, as is the established practice of the commission, they must begin a pilot basis process whereby 1 or 2 assembly constituencies where there are some NRIs available can be experimented, and subsequent to the testing and validation, the whole process can be scaled up to the state election and finally to the general election. So this much about the NRIs. Now I come to the main issue of migrant resident Indians. We will use MRIs for the sake of ease. Again, I would mention that when the SLPs were being heard by the Supreme Court, one of the petitioners expanded the scope of the SLP by alleging that the MRIs are also being denied voting opportunities, and therefore again, in response to the Supreme Court's discussion hearing, we set up a committee in 2015 and 16, and that committee also gave a lot of thought to this issue. The committee also consulted political parties. I must say that all political parties had agreed that the idea of extending facilities to MRIs is a very good idea, and they supported this idea in general. But they were also of the opinion, as Mr. Rawat mentioned a little while ago, that further action may not be possible till a proper mechanism of defining a migrant is formulated. That was the view of some political what Professor that the facility extended to the must also be extended to MR, but they supported the concerning facilities. This issue has also been discussed by several speakers here, and I must acknowledge the work done by Professor Ashwani in our tenure there. I forward to his book. It's a very, very good book. This needs to be read by. In any case, coming back to it is not that the issue of MRI is not in focus. The MRI issue has been raised in the parliament. Many people must be aware of this, of the discussion in the parliament where NRI and MRI issue was discussed. There was also an interministerial committee of ministers in 2015. Of course, progress is yet to be made. So now there are a couple of issues that must be borne in mind. Mr. Rawat indicated towards those. One is that MRIs do not constitute an identifiable and countable class of electors. Under the existing norms, we found that none of the agencies is able to give a uniform definition. Therefore, this is one aspect. The second aspect, as Professor Ashwani mentioned, that and Mr. Khandelwal also, that migrant laborers, again, of two types. Some move permanently, and therefore, as Dr. Quraishi mentioned, under the legal framework, those who have migrated permanently can avail of the current facilities as provided in the law of registering and voting at the new place. Now, the issue is pertaining to the bulk of temporary and seasonal workers who keep traveling all over the country in search of work, but they remain connected to their original place of residence, but they can't travel there, as already highlighted by my colleagues. We also have a class of workers who are not available on the polling day on account of various duties, emergency duties, or other exigencies. And therefore, one view that can be considered very clearly is that unless we are able to come up with a broadly acceptable definition of migrant, let's begin with a small subset of domestic migrants, those migrants who are not able to go to their polling places, who are on essential duties. And here is the concept of absentee voting that is coming into the play. And I will in a minute, if Professor Chhokar will give me 2-3 minutes, I will finish that part. Now with regard to, therefore there is a need for development of a definition, and there is a need to bring in the concept of absentee voting, particularly for those workers who are not able to participate in the election on the polling day. Now, what are the methods that we can consider and have been considered? Physical transmission of postal ballot to MRIs is a nightmare. Will be a very, very difficult issue, because there are issues of time cycles, counting, recount, vis-a-vis EVMs. Those issues will come. Proxy voting will also possible, as mentioned by and other things. Now, again, I think the postal
I think we are not able to hear Dr. Zaidi. Can we hear him?
No, we can't. There's some internet issue.
Am I audible?
Okay,
Dr.
now it's
Zaidi,
back.
I will take 2-3 minutes more only. I don't know where did we lose the connection.
you were talking about the physical delivery of ballot papers, etc., would be a nightmare to MRIs.
Okay, we were on MRI. You heard that.
Concept of absentee voting you were about to talk.
Okay. So we have not lost much. So I was saying that physical transmission of postal ballot, in case of MRIs, is not possible. Proxy voting, for various reasons which my predecessors speakers have spoken, is also not possible. I think the only possible method could be the electronic transmission of postal ballot. And here I must mention that the concept of national polling centers, the concept of district absentee voting centers is taking shape in the commission, and I will in a minute tell you that how that can function. But the prerequisite is that the class of MRI must be identifiable, must be distinct, must be countable. They must remain registered at their original place of residence, and that they are not able to travel to their original place. Now, why I am saying that the concept of national polling center or district absentee voting centers can be worked out and can be feasible is because, again, the fact that we had extended the one-way electronic transmission of postal ballot to service voters in last 4 years, since 2016, when Mr. Rawat and I began this system, 2 million postal ballots have been dispatched electronically. 90% of them were downloaded, and 60% of postal ballots to the for my see that commission, I'm sure, is categories of voters, and therefore I would make 3-4 suggestions for the government and holders. Is that on the of an acceptable definition of and there will be a institutional mechanism of this definition. So as we hear political parties are demanding consultation, and therefore the Commission can re-engage for in-depth consultation with political parties, because this is a subject that will require a very, very broad consensus. The third one is that the Commission must request the group of ministers to now push this agenda forward, because it is out there for past 4 years. So that is another thing that I would say. And the last point that I would mention is that in the meantime, for a subset of MRIs, I mean, of course, the legal framework will come after examination by the group of ministers and formulation of law. In the meantime, Commission can continue to work on the concept of national voting centers, conduct mock trials without assigning them to be the genuine ones, and in the meantime refine processes so that as and when the legal framework comes, the Commission is ready to implement. I'm actually very happy that the Election Commission is transitioning from the conventional. It's a change of mindset from 2014. I have seen it up to now, that it is transitioning from the conventional modes of voting to alternate methods of voting. And as ADR has rightly flagged the issue, I'm sure some recommendation should go to the Commission for more push for our MRIs, domestic migrants, and bring them within the fold of the entire electoral democracy. I would say one thing as a last sentence, that our MRIs are not. I mean, we must flag this issue, that our MRIs are registered. Most of them, I'm sure, are registered in their home constituencies. So to that extent, they are part of the process. It is a different thing that they are not to participate, for which we are discussing it here today, and I'm sure it will make great progress as we move forward. The issue has been flagged very rightly by Professor Chhokar, and the views that will emerge today, I think, will go a significant way. It may not be solved in 1 year. It may take decades. After all, experiments like EVM took 30 years. Therefore, but the beginning has to be made. That is why I would compliment ADR for this wonderful initiative. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking a little longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zaidi. I cannot resist responding to your last observation that it may take years or decades. And I'm reminded of a couplet by Mirza Ghalib. हमने माना कि तगाफुल न करोगे लेकिन हो जाएंगे हम तुमको खबर होने तक. So it will take time, one can understand, but I mean, we can discuss that because the Election Commission's actions on this front are not, widely known, at least. That's all I can say. Anyway, we now have our last speaker who has been added recently, because yesterday I got a call from Ms. Tisa Setulwad that the Center for Justice and Peace conducted a campaign during last year when the migrants were returning home as a result of the lockdown, and they got some 50,000 signatures and so on. So since they have done some significant work, we have invited Ms. Setulwad, and I would request her to share her views, but I would also request kindly, please be brief, because we are already into our question and answer time. So the less time you take, the more grateful we will be to you. So, Ms. Setulwad. You are muted. You are muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is it okay now? Is it okay now, sir? Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah. A very good afternoon to my esteemed fellow participants, and I'm really grateful to the Association for Democratic Reforms for accommodating Citizens for Justice and Peace. I want to just briefly say that I really want to thank not just Professor Ashwani Kumar, but Dr. Rajiv Khandelwal from the Ajivika Bureau, which has been doing sterling work on this question. We began work on this about a year ago, and particularly after the COVID-19 lockdown. I mean, lots of things have been said, far more prescient and important than what we can offer. But I just want to add a couple of things which might bring something to the discussion. considering that ADR has launched this initiative to take this very crucial issue forward. And we would really like to assure you that the 51,000 signatures that we have got on the memorandum to the Election Commission, which was given on July 10th, 2020, to the Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Arora, along with 5 other mass organizations from Bengal, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, and West Bengal. We'll be happy to share it with the participants. Friends, you know, the whole question of political, I mean, just as Professor Ashwani Kumar has said, that Baba Saheb Ambedkar's clarity of vision that brought Article 326 of the Constitution into universal adult franchise, and what it means for the political empowerment of a section that suffers, as Khandelwal pointed out so importantly, from complete lack of citizenship rights, whether it is question of right to work, right to dignified labor. So much of this will get linked to the question of the vote. And I know there are issues of definition. I know there are issues of Article 20 of the Representation, Section 20 of the Representation of People's Act, all of these issues. But I really would urge that just like the armed forces postal ballot, equally crucial, or the NRI postal ballot, which was a politically important issue for some political dispensations, was rushed through so quickly. I think we need to really prioritize this. If there's an interministerial group, as we were informed by Dr. Zaidi from 2015, the public of India needs to know what that interministerial group proceedings have been doing. To offer some more insights, I just want to say that according to the 2011 census, the internal migrants stand at 450 million, and we expect a 45% surge. There was a 45% surge then from 2001. And among these, 26% of the migration, that is 11.7 crores, occurs inter-district, and 12%, that is 54 million, occurs intra-state. Now, according to studies conducted by various groups, an average of these studies shows that 78% of interstate migrant voters actually have the voting card. And the inability to vote comes from the fragility of their living conditions, their work conditions, their economic conditions. So I think while the definition may be important, I think the definition cannot be a bar. I would like to draw attention not so much to the Representation of People's Act, because there are experts here, but to the Interstate Migrant Workers Act of 1979, where the provisions of which are not fulfilled by various political parties and state governments, and even central government. That if you look at the rules under the ISMW Act, Rule 4.1 provides for a registration form, a certificate of registration. It provides for registers and records of statistics of migrant workers in Chapter 6 of the ISMW rules. Rule 49 states that every principal employer and contractor needs to maintain registers vis-a-vis the Central Labour Commission under the Act. Now, political will is lacking both at the center and the states, because our visit to about 6 of such labour departments in the state and in the center have shown that these registers are not maintained properly. So how are you ever going to get to the state of a definition when your registration requirement under the law in the 1979 Interstate Migrant Workers Act is not fulfilled as of now? In Chapter 6 of the rules, there are provisions for maintenance of the register of personal details of the migrants, of the muster, the wages register, deductions, maintains and preservation of all register, the periodic returns of the migrants to their home states. All of this is supposed to be maintained by the central government under this act, and the state governments have to cooperate through their labor departments. However, this is not happening. We saw this in my city of Mumbai, because Mumbai and Delhi possibly are 2 states that are the biggest recipients of migrant labor across the country, though Chennai is a close third. And do Mumbai and Delhi actually give these workers their due, give these citizens their due, the citizens that run our cities and our economies? So I think when we pay attention to the lapses and the gaps that we can fill, please let us look very carefully at the Interstate Migrant Workers Act and the rules that are contained within this act, because there is a detailed prescription and proscription for maintenance of the registers of migrant workers, which is not being done. And this affects just as Mr. Khandelwal was saying, what happens when there's an accident, what happens when there's a tragedy, what kind of food they eat, hunger, etc., etc. Now, coming to the Supreme Court has held in several judgments that a voter's ability to exercise his right to vote has been held as an essential aspect of their fundamental right of the freedom of expression. And in 2003, while it held that a distinction has to be drawn between the conferment of the right to vote on fulfillment of requisite criteria and the culmination of that right in the final act of expressing choice towards a particular candidate by means of a ballot, that Article 19(1)(a) is attractive, and freedom of voting is very distinct from the right to vote, is thus because it's seen as a species of the freedom of expression itself, and therefore carries within it the auxiliary and complementary rights, such as the right to secure information about the candidate, which are conducive to exercising this freedom. So lots of things are linked up, whether you look at Ponuswamy versus Returning Officer case, People's Union of Civil Liberties, Kuldeep Nayyar, all these judgments are available. But I think when we're looking at how the Election Commission of India, Honorable Election Commission of India, and I'm absolutely delighted to see that from Dr. Zaidi to Mr. Rawat to Dr. Quraishi, we have such an eminent panelist of former election commissioners here. This has to be a priority because while we are seeing the plugging of the holes and the rules, we need to look at the failure of the executive, states, and the center to actually fulfill the interstate migrant workers' laws and rules, which will enable a more concrete definition and a concrete idea of numbers, quality, and kind of migration, and how you can actually implement the right to vote of the section, which is so important for them to realize their full ability, not just as citizens, but as political entities in this country. To conclude, because I realize that the question answer session is extremely important, I would just like to say that and these are all figures thanks to sterling work done by bureaus like the Ajivika Bureau, that one survey shows that 48% of those surveys, only 48% of the migrant surveys voted in the 2009 elections, when the average was 59.7%. So you can see the gap. These patterns have stayed consistent. In the 2019 Lok Sabha polls, major sender states, that is UP and Bihar, had lowest voter turnout at 57.3% and 59.21% respectively, while the national average was 67.4%. So you're seeing that the biggest sender states, which are UP and Bihar, actually have a drop in voting percentage. This can be collated exactly to the migrants that they're sending out because of poor economic conditions in the home state. I mean, we know that the Election Commission of India's, Section 60C power to notify certain class of voters to vote via the postal ballot. We know that 28 lakh votes were received via postal ballots in 2019. We know how the Supreme Court has interpreted this whole thing, but I think nobody can describe the immediate need for the Indian migrant worker that finally during the COVID-19 pandemic, the urban gaze, the middle class gaze was turned upon this section that runs our economies and cities. Ambedkar's prescience, when he said that the right of representation and the right to hold office under the state are two most important rights to make up citizenship. And therefore, we need to make this a time-bound process. I can understand when Dr. Zaidi said it might take years, but I think we need to say that we need this to happen quickly so that a large section of our people who are disenfranchised, and just as Professor Ashwani Kumar said, that even among the migrant workers, there are Adivasis, there are Dalits, there are the poorest of the poor, there are bonded labor who are more disenfranchised than others, actually get the right to vote. So let's turn our attention also to the Interstate Migrant Workers Act and the rules therein, which put certain obligations on governments to be able to register these votes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Italmat. That was a very valuable input that you provided. We really appreciate your contribution. Now we are supposed to go into the question answer session, but I was sort of wondering whether I could make a few comments before that. One is that I am actually, I'm sorry I'm using a strong word, I am aghast that the definition is a problem. And we don't know who is to define
Yeah,
This only shows that we don't want to define.
exactly.
So the question of everything is held up because there is no definition. Are bhai, we can provide a definition tomorrow. Ajivika Bureau will certainly provide one. So
Yeah.
that's, I mean, I'm actually amazed. I did not know this. I must admit my ignorance. The other issue that I wanted to touch upon is Dr. Quraishi has left because he had a medical appointment. But he started his opening remarks by saying that migrants, internal migrants, have always been a problem for the Election Commission. Now, I felt very sad. Why should there be a problem?
Yeah.
They are entitled citizens. And rather than saying that this is a problem, we should consider them our stakeholders whom we need to facilitate for being able to vote. Then, just a minute. The question he had raised was, where do I want to exercise my political power? Now, you know, to say that you make up your mind where you want to exercise, that is not fair to a citizen.
No,
A citizen is exercising a fundamental right of citizenship. The Election Commission is nobody to say, you make up your mind and then we'll do what you want. Election Commission, I am sorry, sir, with all due deference and apologies, Election Commission has to also realize that it is providing a service to the nation. It is not doing a favor to migrants ke unke liye ye kar diya, badi ehsan kar diya. I am sorry that, this is the mindset which I think needs change in the officialdom of the Election Commission. I mean, you just contrast it with the NRIs. उनके लिए ये हो रहा है, वो हो रहा है, सब कुछ हो रहा है, voluntarily हो रहा है, लेकिन इसके बारे में कोई बात ही नहीं हो रही. So these are some of the questions that I wanted to comment on. I endorse Mr. Rajiv Khandelwal's view that linking election or voting to Aadhaar is not on. And the Supreme Court has ruled on this specifically. And not even without the Supreme Court's ruling, I would say there are enough problems with Aadhaar by itself. We don't want that to happen to the electoral process. I think I will stop here, and Divya and Nandini, can we move to the question answer session? Divya and Nandini? Isn't a system of compulsory registration of every citizen at the place of residence through self-declaration and a separate register for temporary migrants necessary at the Gram Panchayat ward level as in many other developed countries? This will enable a continuously updated electoral roll at ward or Gram Panchayat level. Dr. Zaidi or Mr. Rawat, who would like to take this?
Thank you very much, Ms. Chamraj, for this question. Actually, the current legal framework already provides for. It's not a compulsory registration. Let me say, we don't have a system of mandatory registration, mandatory voting, but there is already legal framework available that a citizen, subject to fulfillment of certain conditions such as the ordinary place of residence and age proof, can get himself or herself registered at a place of residence. And here the concept of ordinary residence comes into play, which means that the person should be able to sleep for some time under that roof, and therefore it is not a problem. Secondly, if that person India is uniquely placed to have a system of continuous updation of the electoral rolls. So both of these aspects are already covered. This is the choice of the person to get herself or himself registered at the new place of residence. Thank you. I hope it clarifies.
I would like to add, Kathyani, thank you for the question. I'd like to add, you say that compulsory registration of every citizen at the place of residence. Now, there are a lot of people who do not have a place of residence. And that is not a small number. I mean, you can see them in Bombay, you can see them in Delhi, you can see them in Hyderabad, and I'm sure you can see them in Bangalore. So, it is nice to say that this is what happens in developed countries. I agree, it happens in developed countries and it would be very useful. But have we been able to provide our citizens shelter to every citizen, which can be the place of residence? I have my doubts, and therefore we should do the best we can. And what Dr. Zaidi said is perfectly all right. And I just wanted to flag this issue of a place of residence is not necessarily available to every citizen of this country, and there are several. There's a fairly significant proportion who do not have this facility. So, shall we move to the next question? Mr. Ashutosh Mishra says देश के भीतर समय समय पर स्थानीय निकाय अथवा विधानसभा अथवा लोकसभा के चुनाव होते हैं, परंतु इन चुनावों में मतदाताओं की एक बड़ी संख्या मतदान नहीं कर सकती है। अयंत्र रोजगार के कारण ऐसे मतदाता अपने पोलिंग बूथों पर भी नहीं पहुंच पाते हैं। चुनाव आयोग भी अपने तमाम प्रयासों के बावजूद इन्हें मताधिकार प्रयोग की व्यवस्था नहीं दे सकी। इस पर चुनाव आयोग की प्रतिक्रिया क्या होगी? आशुतोष जी, चुनाव आयोग का कोई प्रतिनिधि तो हमारे साथ है नहीं, तो हम चुनाव आयोग की प्रतिक्रिया तो नहीं ले सकते, लेकिन कुछ सेवानिवृत्त मुख्य चुनाव उपयुक्त हमारे साथ हैं। अगर वो कुछ कहना चाहें, डॉक्टर जैदी और रावत, वुड यू लाइक टू से समथिंग?
इफ यू लाइक आई कैन, अभी हम एक इस पे कमेंट दे सकते हैं। जैसा कि हम जानकारी रखते हैं कि ऐसे लोग जो मतदान नहीं कर सकते हैं क्योंकि वो दूसरे जगह पर रोजगार के सिलसिले में चले गए हैं, तो इनमें जैसे मैंने अपने रिमार्क्स में भी बोला था कि इलेक्शन कमीशन ने अब एक नया कंसेप्ट आया है एब्सेंटी वोटिंग का, और एब्सेंटी वोटिंग के तहत उन्होंने एक ऐसे क्लास ऑफ वर्कर्स को रखा है जो ड्यूटी पे होने के कारण या कुछ कंपल्सिव रीजंस होने के कारण पोलिंग बूथ पर नहीं, तो इन लोग एक बनाया गया है पोस्टल वोटिंग सेंटर, और ये जो बड़ा एब्सेंटी वोटिंग का अंतर्गत ये आता है। तो अभी कोई फर्म अवेलेबल नहीं है जिसमें लोगों को जो अन्यत्र रोजगार के सिलसिले में चले गए हैं उनके लिए भी कोई बहुत डिफाइंड लेकिन में कंसेप्ट ऑफ एब्सेंचर और स्टेप उसके लिए पहले जैसे कि अभी हालांकि प्रोफेसर चोर ने कहा कि डेफिनेशन रास्ते में आ रही है, ये बड़ी चिंता का विषय है। हम भी इस बात से सहमत हैं, लेकिन एक डेफिनेशन तो लानी ही पड़ेगी और वो लाई भी जा सकती है। ऐसी बात नहीं है कि उसमें बहुत बड़ा कोई टाइम लगेगा। तो अगर एक डेफिनेशन आ जाए और हमारे पास क्लासेस ऑफ माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स बंद हो जाए धीरे धीरे करके, तो एब्सेंटी वोटिंग का एक कंसेप्ट लाया जा सकता है जिसमें ऐसे लोग जो अपना ऑप्शन देना चाहते हैं पोस्टल बैलेट के जरिए, उनके लिए उनके डेस्टिनेशंस पर नेशनल पोलिंग सेंटर्स बनाए जा सकते हैं, डिस्ट्रिक्ट एब्सेंटी वोटर बनाए जा सकते हैं। यानी कि ये अभी सब कंसेप्ट के स्टेज पर है, जिनको बड़ा लीगल फ्रेमवर्क लाना पड़ेगा, जिनके ऊपर प्रोसेसेस और प्रोसीजर के ऊपर बड़ा काम करना पड़ेगा। तो ये सब डुएबल है, लेकिन अभी तो फिलहाल ऐसे वर्कर्स को कवर करने का कोई और तरीका अवेलेबल नहीं है सिवाय इसके कि वो अपने पुराने स्थान पर जाकर के वोट करें। ये थोड़ा सा विचित्र स्थिति है, लेकिन हम तो आशावान है कि धीरे धीरे करके ये स्थिति जरूर बदलेगी, और अगर सभी लोग उसमें प्रयास करेंगे तो विभिन्न लेवल पर, तो इसमें तो स्थिति सुधरेगी जरूर और उनको लाना पड़ेगा फोल्ड के अंदर। थैंक यू।
धन्यवाद जैदी साहब। नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन प्लीज। Oh, Katyani again. How can duplication of names in the databases be prevented without linkage with a unique ID for each person? Once again, Dr. Zaidi or Mr. Rawat, you.
I think Rawat साहब हमारे colleague हैं शायद available, if he may like to react to this.
Yeah, it has been done by the Election Commission time and again, starting in 2016, National Electoral Roll Purification Program. Election Commission used deduplication software, even photo recognition software, and did the physical verification to ensure that duplication of names in our electoral roll database is reduced to minimum. And I think we achieved a lot of success, and that is why in many states now you can hear that voting percentage or turnout percentage is going up to 90%, 91%. That is because of purification of the electoral rolls. And I think this process is still on.
Thank you, Mr. Rawat. Next question, please. Mr. S.N. Shukla, IAS retired advocate. Oh, Mr. Shukla from Lucknow. He is the founder of Lok Prairie. Whether the actual magnitude of the problem and the techno-economic feasibility of implementing the proposal has been considered by the Election Commission. Once again, I think two of you are to field all the questions. So, Mr. Rawat or Mr. Zaidi, Dr. Zaidi.
I think let me respond. The magnitude of the problem will be known only when we have a definition as to whom we consider as migrant worker. Unless that is clear, the four walls of containing the issue will just not be non-existent. And therefore, first we must agree, and in fact all political parties and other stakeholders must agree on a definition as to who will be considered as a migrant worker for the purposes of providing special facilities for voting from a place different from the one where he is enrolled. Then techno-economic feasibility is not an issue at all. Once the universe is known as to these are the people who fall in the category of migrant workers, Election Commission has the wherewithal and necessary tools to implement the facilitation of their voting from wherever they want, either the place of enrollment or the place where they are working.
Thank you, Rawat. And since we have had so much discussion on definition, and having been involved with Ajibaka Bureau for quite a while, can I make a suggestion, Mr. Khandelwal, that we pose a definition and put it out in the public domain, send it to the Election Commission, send it to all and sundry, including political parties, election commissioners, and former chief election commissioners, and everybody. And let's say, people comment on that definition. I mean, again, I am just, nobody seems to have taken it, and therefore this is a low-hanging fruit, if I may say so.
No, we'll do that, and we certainly use, some set of parameters to define a migrant worker. And I would say let's keep our tolerance for complexity alive. It is a complex definition. We cannot have a one-line summarizing all migrant workers, qualifying them for to enter the electoral kind of process. We will certainly submit it. It's a good idea. I think it's a good challenge to have to submit a comprehensive definition of migrant workers for this particular issue.
Yours now.
Professor Chhokar, if I may point out.
Ji.
Actually, I was listening to your being surprised on the lack of definition. Actually, different government agencies like Registrar General of India, like the Ministry of Labor, and like NSSO, each one is having its own definition of the migrants. Now, political parties are a definition. Sure, they must be having political, and therefore ADR and or whoever are in the work of like can work with, as you rightly mentioned, can work with political parties, can work with these government agencies, and can work and and take it to the election. I mean, this process here, we must our full support will be. We can also have a review the election commission and can push this process. Therefore, let us overcome this obstacle first. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zaidi. It's very useful. Any other question? Jastinder Singh. We have read about some progress on NRI voting. Whatever process is adopted for NRIs, can that not be applied to MRIs also? Again, Mr. Rawat and Dr. Quraishi, or would you like me to respond to it?
I can do that if you like.
No, please do. Go ahead.
So as I mentioned in my remarks that that the latest method of alternate voting for NRI is to take up one-way electronic transmission of postal ballot. Now the issue, I mean the issue with the NRIs is that they are easily countable, they are easily distinct, and their place of residence is very well known because they are generally located at one place. And therefore, the latest proposal of the Commission with regard to NRI is to first get the option from the NRI whether he or she wants to opt by means of postal ballot, then to cut the time cycle, transfer the electronic postal ballot to the embassy, then the NRI reports to embassy, marks his ballot, drop in the box, the embassy official sort it out and send it to the returning officer. Here the question of polling agents being present, etc., is a doable issue, can be sorted out. I am sure if you engage the attention of the Commission, they will work according to law, which they have always been, they are supposed to do. Now, where this process can be adopted for the NRIs, if Mr. Singh paid the attention, when I was discussing about various options of MRI, one of the options was again one-way electronic transmission by setting up the national voting centers at the place of destination, or district absentee voting centers at the destination, or postal voting center at the destination. But here we have to be very clear as to who will be covered. And that is where the question once again comes back to the same definition of migrant workers. Once the definition is frozen, we have a distinct class. As Mr. Rawat mentioned, techno-economic feasibility is not a big option. This has been very well tested in case of service voters. After all, in 4 years, electronic postal ballots have 92% were downloaded, 62% were sent back. So but we must cross first.
Zaidi साहब, आपका इंटरनेट शायद काम नहीं कर रहा है. We can't hear you.
I made intervention. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yes.
आपने हमें कब सुना?
नहीं, आप काफी तो पूरा हो गया था मेरे ख्याल में आपका.
तो फिर तो कंप्लीट है. मेरा कहने का मतलब ये था कि अगर हम डेफिनेशन वाली हर्डल को पहले क्रॉस कर लें तो टेक्नो इकोनॉमिक फिजिबिलिटी पार्ट, जैसा रावत साहब कह रहे थे, इट इज वेरी वेल टेस्टेड. हम ये 4 साल में कमीशन टेस्ट कर चुका है सर्विस वोटर्स के बारे में, और ये कंसेप्ट को ग्राउंड पे रियलाइज करने में मेरे विचार से, रावत साहब भी सहमत होंगे, टेक्नो इकोनॉमिक पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से इट्स नॉट अ बिग डील. लेट अस फर्स्ट क्रॉस द फर्स्ट हर्डल फर्स्ट.
छोड़िए सर, अब डेफिनेशन तो हम लोग बना के छोड़ेंगे, आप घबराइए नहीं.
हाँ, तो हम आपके साथ हैं ना, इसको इम्प्लीमेंट भी करवाएंगे.
या बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. थैंक यू वेरी मच. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. Mr. C.P. Jha, has the Election Commission conducted any study on these problems? And if so, what is its outcome? What is reliable estimated number of migrant workers in India, especially Bihar? इसका तो, I mean, the study, Professor Ashwani Kumar has already described this study in significant detail. So, and the outcomes also he had mentioned briefly. And if Mr. Jha is interested, I am sure Professor Ashwani Kumar can send him a copy of his study or the findings.
एक लाइन बोल रहे सर. If you allow me to say just a few words, sir. Professor Kuchar. Sir, what we have done that, the study is available at ECI website also, and also Shram organization website. The study is also now being cited in several papers, academic papers, research papers also. And we have estimated fairly based on, available data. But I must qualify, I must say with a, qualifier, that there has been no national survey of migrant workers in the country. So let us look at, scientific idea, and I'm adding to what Dr. Zaidi said, to arrive at a omnibus, acceptable, consensual definition of what constitutes migrant worker will require that kind of exercise. In fact, in our study recommendation, we made out very clear to ECI to conduct a national survey with the help of the government agency on migrant workers. So we have different pros of understanding, but we don't have, overall. But on the estimate basis, sir, we have 120 million people, short-term and seasonal migrants. I think we are talking about them. We are not talking about migrants like me, privileged migrants, or those who are officials and working, in different, occupations. We are talking about migrant workers. We are talking about, as Tista referred to our work, Dhamtari mill, those bonded workers there. I think, that they need to be captured. That's important, sir, I think. There are many people who are migrating from Bihar, sir, and we noticed that some of them, and there is also missing puzzle here, that Kochar Sahab, is intra-district migration. We are not looking at intra-state migration. Much of the problem, Professor Weiner, 50 years captured in Mumbai, arose from the intra-state Maharashtra migration, not the so-called Bhaiya migration. Sir. So I think we need to a lot of myths, sir, to this exercise.
Absolutely. I agree completely. Thank you. Next question, please. Nandini, is it our Nandini? Can remote voting cater to the issue of migrants' right to exercise and cast vote? Also, what are the amendments required and challenges foreseen in rolling out the same? Now I need to go back to the former chief election commissioners. And it is not the ADR Nandini, it is some other Nandini. Thank you. Yes, sir, any response?
Yeah, I mean, yes. The concept of remote voting is nothing but a kind of internet voting, where the ballot paper will be transferred electronically to the voter, and the voter will mark it electronically and send it back to the returning officer. Now this can happen under controlled conditions, This can happen under uncontrolled conditions. Uncontrolled conditions is that it is between RO and the voter, and the controlled condition is where you set up a national polling center or whatever you call it. There the voter goes through a coding system. He downloads his ballot paper, mark it under that controlled polling booth system, and send it back to the RO. But this is still in a very, very amorphous state. Some work I read was being done somewhere, but as such, I don't think this system is being pushed. Again, it will relate to whom this remote voting center, remote voting system should be extended. Of course, this will require further refinement of technology, again, political consensus associated. Now, this is what I know. Mr. Rawat, comment if he has more information.
रावत साहब, आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे? Well, Mr. Rawat is not responding. I just want to add, in response to Nandini's question, I think remote voting, and as Dr. Zaidi said, it is nothing like internet voting. I personally think it is a non-starter. We have had no end of problems starting with paper ballots. Now we have no end of problems with EVMs and VVPATs. To have remote voting, and given the IT expertise that is available around the country, I really think this is not something we should be spending too much time on. So, thank you, Dr. Zaidi. Next question, please. Will this increase the scope for fraud? What measures can be taken to prevent malpractice? Adari Bopaya. Zaidi sahab, you are smiling, therefore I know you have something to say.
नहीं, रावत साहब तो इसके बारे में अच्छा बोल देंगे. I'm sure he.
Mr. Rawat has logged out.
अच्छा, he left.
You are the only one now.
Oh, so in any case, as I mentioned, and I think this question pertains to remote voting only. Presuming that this relates to remote voting, yes, there are concerns expressed by political parties that there could be all possible technological malpractices, technological terms like phishing. I mean, the voter is voting to a party, but in the meantime, it is taken out and sent to party B. All those kinds of malpractices and technological hijacking, everything is possible under internet voting or remote voting, and political parties are not prepared. This appears to be a very appealing and very attractive proposal, but it's not a matter of any priority at present, as Professor Chhokar said. And even in the world, very few countries, 2 or 3 countries have adopted this system, and they are also having problems. So I don't think internet voting or remote voting will be workable in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. It will certainly increase the scope of fraud, and some of us may also get jobs offered by the Harvard University. So next question, Nandini.
Why
are political parties shun the migrants when they have been championed for NRIs, farmers, castes, etc.? Why are they left out politically? Luangama Sungalojam.
Well, if you permit me, Mr. Moderator, yeah. So as I mentioned that it is not dealt with our political class. Actually, in 2000, when we were considering of NRIs, even that thing, the political party had mentioned that they were opposed to the idea of not extending. They were very, very many of same facilities must be extended. That is one. Now, many political parties had raised this issue in the parliament. Many of you must be aware, where they again, I think there was a lot of discussion for several hours in the parliament, and where they said that we must also treat domestic migrants at par with NRIs. Number three, I think following that discussion and sensing the temperature in the parliament, an interministerial committee of ministers was set up in 2015. It held some meetings with the commission. Of course, it has not made much progress since then. So it is not as if the issue is not addressed. And finally, as I mentioned, political parties in consultation on the issue of MRIs, domestic migrants, were broadly agreeable to the idea that it is a good idea to extend the facility to domestic migrant. But again, coming back to the same vexed question, they also said that please evolve a definition of migrant. And otherwise, they support the idea. I'm sorry, Professor Chhokar. I think we are coming back to the same elephant in the room. So I hope I have a question.
Yeah. Professor Ashwani Kumar has written a response to this question, which says short-term migrants are not a voting bloc or a political class for the parties. Actually, this is a very, very important observation. Thank you, Professor Ashwani Kumar. Next question. Why? Acha. Shivani Kapoor. Oh, political parties have not been defined anywhere under the law except for the 10th schedule of the Constitution, which is anti-defection law. Yet we all know the kind of privileges, perks, benefits that are given to them, including and not limiting to 100% tax exemption. So why not apply the same precedent for migrant workers? Why are we still stuck with the definition when it comes to migrant workers? Is this our Shivani Kapoor or?
Yes.
Anyway, Zaidi, it is up to you.
Well, I think the first part of the question you can tell her internally. The second part relates to definition issue. Well, at this point in time, I mean, having heard all the participants, I think it will be possible to solve this issue of definition also. And I'm sure with today's discussion and resolve, the civil society, people like us, sure the issue can be addressed and pushed. That is all I can say at this. Regarding political parties, Chhokar will be, he has been dealing with regard to the entire genetic material of political parties.
As you said, I think I will discuss it with Shivani privately and we'll take care of that. So I think we have finished all questions. If Professor Ashwani, you want to add something before we close? Very briefly.
Sir, my sense is following as a political scientist that, we have been discussing with, Dr. Zaidi, and the book detail will be available. We are talking about a huge citizenship deficit in Indian democracy, sir. I think my final words are about highlighting the citizenship deficit, and we must bring it back to our political imagination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. General Verma, would you like to add something?
No, thank you, sir.
Dr. Zaidi?
Yeah, as a way forward, I would suggest that let's formulate 5, 6, 7 recommendations or conclusions based on today's discussion, and let us take it up with the commission, let us take it up with the government, and we must follow it up periodically. If need be, we must hold meetings with the commission, and I'm sure some solution will be found out. I'm hopeful.
I would request Dr. Zaidi that you be actively involved in this process Because when we take up with the Election Commission and the government, we have a certain baggage that is not very, helpful. But people like you would be very, very nice to have with us. Thank you very much.
No, I agree. I agree.
Thank you. Ms. Sitalwad, you want to say something very briefly? You are
Muted.
mute. You are muted.
Sorry, as an outcome of today's very, very valuable discussions, one of the most immediate tasks, I think, is to collectively somehow put together a complex, nuanced, broad-based definition of the migrant, if that is going to be the hurdle. And I think with the kind of expertise on the table today available, it should not be difficult to do that. We'd be happy to assist in whatever humble way we can, and at any other level in this campaign, which is a very important campaign for us. Professor Ashwani Kumar, Mr. Khandelwal, and Mr. Jagdeep Chhokar. And of course, Dr. Zaidi. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Well, in conclusion, I can only thank all the participants, all the panelists, first of all, including those who have had to log out, Dr. Quraishi, Mr. Rawat, and Mr. Rajiv Khandelwal, and all the three of you who are here, and General Verma and his team, Nandini and Divya, and I suppose Anas and some other people. Thank you very much for organizing it. And the participants who are kind of unseen and more or less unheard, except for the questions. I am hoping that the would have found this useful and I suppose challenging. And I hope it encourages or motivates or provokes some of the participants to actually do something about it rather than passively listening and casually chatting. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your presence. Thank you.